sounds familiar. Welcome, pilots. My name is Hybrid V, and we are going to talk about the audio panel at CitizenCon this year. And, well, originally I was going to go through a lot of the CitizenCon panels in chronological order, but of course, all of you in the comments section were like, hey, Hybrid, did you check out the audio stuff? Yes, guys. Yes, I checked out the audio stuff. I was at CitizenCon, but I'm getting impatient as well, too. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So first and foremost, I'm going to cover everything that was talked about in the audio panel, and then I'm going to come back with my thoughts and opinions at the end. So first and foremost, we had Graham Phillipson, Director of Audio Technology, who was talking about how audio is crucial to the immersion of Star Citizen, which of course it is. It is a simulator after all. Immersion is the #1 factor there. And he alluded to how resonance is a key function of that. Resonance, of course, is something they talked about earlier this year, in which you have sounds coming in and hitting the hull and reverberating throughout the ship. So if you were, for example, in engineering and you took a missile hit, you, while working on your panels in engineering, could actually hear that reverberate through the hull. So there's some level of immersion as well as some situational awareness, no matter where you are within the ship. And this is just an example of Claudius and SIG Audio kind of working together as being a thing being built from the ground up to really give CIG the tools they need to build a much more immersive experience overall. Next, he then showcased some newer stuff coming in, including their new multi-band compressor, which gives them some new tools to work with improving the existing audio. And he showed that through some before and after shots of some weapon sounds, so let's go ahead and take a look at that now.
They're a great simulation, but we wanted to take them further and express the sound pressure, the forces being exerted. Our new in-house audio effects, particularly the multiband compressor, tuned by our sound designers, give us this result. The compression serves to illustrate the power of the weapons and the effect that they have when going beyond the limits of the listener.
He then showed that same technology being applied to the ship weapons, so let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Taking us from this to this.
And then he went on to talk about in-cockpit audio and those changes. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
But it's not just about feeling powerful. Changes in audio can create a sense of danger, of being out on your own and under threat. Here's an example of ship combat. Sounds good, but what if we wanted a little more realism? The audio propagation tech that we've been rolling out makes it easier to change the soundscape in real time, and a nice use of that technology is to provide a more realistic option. Here, your own weapons resonate through the hull of the ship, only what's in the pressurized cockpit is heard clearly, and the threat level feels higher due to the isolating lack of enemy weapon and ship audio. Making these changes creates space in the audio, both spectrally and temporally, making impacts seem bigger, more damaging, more of a problem for the player.
And there you have it, the no audio sim version that they are working on. And of course, next he then showed off what that looks like in FPS combat as well. So let's go ahead and play that.
This realistic mode isn't limited to the flight experience. It's applied appropriately to the game as a whole. Here's an FPS battle in a depressurized area. With realistic mode, we get that sense of isolation again, giving the location a different colour and adding variety to the audio experience. Player breathing and foley are exaggerated, and other sounds are transmitted through physical contact. That's all from us for now. We look forward to getting these new audio features into your hands.
And that caps off the audio panel for CitizenCon 2953. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into my thoughts and opinions, and let's dive right back in and take a nice bite out of all this tech we're seeing here and all these new features. First and foremost, my opinion on it, I am a little disappointed. It was like less than 5 minutes, the entire panel, and while it was phenomenal and it's great, it did feel like an afterthought. Now, let's be clear, a lot of people do think of audio as an afterthought, despite the fact that audio is by far one of the most crucial elements to bind your game together. People still look at it as it just being this kind of weird esoteric black magic that they don't really put too much thought into, which, hey, it's fair enough. Audio is very, very dry from my perspective as a designer. I can explain to you, it is a very, very dry process. Like if I was ever to showcase me designing sounds, some of you will probably be interested, but the vast majority of you, your eyes will just glaze over because it is a completely dry process when it comes to designing sounds. Now, beyond that, even the engineering aspect and all the behind the scenes black magic that goes into making good sounds also is a dry process as well. But then again, so is the rest of the development. And development itself is just not that sexy to begin with. It just isn't. For example, how many times do you see Star Citizen Live pop around and they're like, hey, let's go ahead and bring in a concept artist to talk about concept art, and then you'll notice that nobody watches those streams, right? It's the same thing for audio. It is an incredibly dry thing. It's not as sexy as new gameplay features or graphics or anything like that. But despite that, it is such a crucial aspect of the game, just as much as concept art is, to the point that if you don't have good audio, you're just not going to have a good game. I'm not joking. Find me a game that you would consider a 9 or a 10 out of 10 and tell me they had bad audio. Please, you won't find it. It's just not there. It's not that. You may find some things around the edges that you disagree with how they handle the audio, but that's all subjective. We're talking about objectively a good technical marvel of audio prowess and design and technology and whatnot. You're just not going to find a game that's just not going to meet that criteria, period. Even games that are like indie games, like Phasmophobia, which I've been playing a lot recently because of Halloween, of course, has incredibly good designed audio. It's not the greatest. The audio on there is not always the perfect. Like they have mix issues and whatnot, but that's tangential. That's a different thing. What I'm talking about is the way they portray the sounds carries so much of that game. Even after its subsequent reworks they've been doing to the audio, it is such an important factor to the spooks in that game. And it's like that for every game. If you don't have good audio, you're not going to have a good game. Now, let me give you an example, because I do think that Star Citizen has good audio. I've seen people kind of clown on CIG's audio for a while now, and I think mostly the issue is, well, development is focused entirely on Squadron 42 for one, and two, the technical aspects of the game are a little bit slow for them to kind of fix every so often. Like right now, currently, we have that weird bug where if you idle in a station, things crackle and start getting weird, but they'll fix that eventually. It's just annoying that they haven't gotten to it yet. But beyond that, let me give you an example of the game running on all cylinders and how good it actually sounds. Make sure you check your hydration as we move. Contact, top of the hill.
Taking cover.
Suppressing fire, top of the hill.
Copy, eyes on.
Roger that, Comet IP, south to north, you are cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot.
Comet, pick a one.
Ooh.
Good hit, good hit.
Comet Zeta, good effect on target. Repeat, good effect on target. Over. That is just a clip of me and members of my org, the Forgotten Heralds, just playing, just getting together and just doing a firefight with some close air support in tow as well to help support out the ground forces. And you can see I have not changed any of the audio in there. The only thing I altered was our voices. That was it. The only thing I did is to make it sound more like a radio and my voice make it sound more like I was in a helmet, basically. And I also made our cast pilot have a different sound as well, too. But that was it. I did not change anything else. I did not add any additional sounds to it. I did not take anything out. I didn't edit. I didn't do anything else. That is simply CIG's work at full blast there. And you can see it sounds good. Now, of course, there's way more they could do to improve that. For example, we didn't hear any bullet ricochets or anything like that. But beyond that, it still sounds good. And if it sounded like potatoes or something out of Roblox, it's not going to translate nearly as well. This is why audio is incredibly crucial for anything that you have to do that is considered an immersive experience. Let me give you an example of what that sounds like when the audio isn't as good as it possibly could be. Now, that was a very, very old clip back when the Inferno was brand new, and me and my org got together and tried to see if we could put something really cool and cinematic together with just the Inferno alone. And as you can see, it does not hold up very well. You can't even hear the Inferno from far away. The bullet impacts sound like very generic sounds. When the missiles were hitting the tank, the Nova, on the ground, you couldn't even hear the explosions. And then after the Nova blew up, it was playing like quantum drive sounds and stuff. Now, granted, again, this is an older build of the game, but I want to use it as an illustrator to show how bad audio can turn something really cool into something really lame almost in an instant. This is why, in my opinion, audio is very important. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir. A lot of you probably watching here are already subscribers who watched me from like my Tail Gunner video and whatnot, and you're all very appreciative of good audio. And I want you to know that it is in good hands with CIG. I'm not saying that they are bad at it. It's just that sometimes we get stuff that doesn't always work out well, and they are willing to work on it and improve on it, which is an example of this panel. I just wish we had more. I would love to see a lot more. Now, I know I'm going to see somebody in the comments say, like, yeah, but Hybrid, I turned my sound off in Star Citizen, or I turned my music off in Star Citizen. Yes, I understand there's some people who do that with their games. I think you're psychopaths. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, the reason why people turn their sounds off in games is because they're just going into autopilot. They are not engaged with what is going on screen. It is akin to them basically going out and commuting on their work week on the freeway, just driving and then just flipping on some music and just tuning out and just staying in their lane. That is all it is. But what we're talking about, like when you're actually engaged with the game, audio is super crucial for that. This is why a lot of game companies spend millions of dollars of their budget on audio alone, because they know audio is an important factor. Now, not saying that CIG isn't doing that. They absolutely are putting their money in the right spots for the company. At least I hope they are. I'm not the one, handling the books. So at least from what I'm seeing, it does look like they are, because they are letting the audio team rebuild a lot of the audio elements from the ground up. They originally were working with Wise, and they decided to move away from Wise, which is a middleware bit of kit that allows you to kind of connect custom pieces of your game and your audio elements together and have it connect to the engine. And they decided to kind of forego that and build something from the ground up. That's where SIG Audio and Claudius come in from. That is their kind of rebuilt from the ground up version of their kind of own version of Wise. And this technology is crucial if you want to give your designers and whatnot more control over building that immersive soundscape that you're trying to go for. And unfortunately, because this panel was so short, it didn't really feel like they showed as much. Now, the entire CitizenCon, including the Squadron 42 kind of showcase, showed all their new stuff they were working on, all kind of mashed together, but the panel is an opportunity for you to explain some of that stuff. And for example, Graham talked about resonance being a thing they talked about earlier in the year, but didn't explain that resonance was actually what was working also in the Gladius cockpit during that scenario where they were showing the audio. And that is a thing that's translating a lot of that sound to the player, and that's what's creating that immersive feedback. So that, because anybody who flies ships now know that the feedback is basically nothing currently. Like you're lucky if you hear any shield impacts, and resonance is kind of part of what is going to fix that. However, they didn't explain that for whatever reason. They just kind of expected you to kind of, I guess, know that. I only know that because I know they talked about it, and then what I heard seems to be the same thing. I don't have confirmation that resonance was actually being utilized there. However, it seems logical that they would just put it in as part of it, because the actual impact sounds that you were hearing on the ship hull were much more pronounced than what we're used to now. And again, I just want to harp on that it was short. There's way more things they could have talked about. For example, new Gladius sounds. Hello, we got a new Gladius sound rework, and there was no mention of that whatsoever. It was just show it, and then only if you've ever paid attention to that stuff, you would know the Gladius sounds different. For example, let's show you right now. I'm going to show you what the Gladius sounds currently in game, and then let's take a look at the Squadron 42 Gladius. So let's go ahead and jump in now.
Taking hits or punching the afterburners to get to cover.
Take him off me! No!
And hold on as you're launched off the deck of the carrier.
Baron 2, you are cleared for launch. Have a safe flight, Baron 2.
Now, me personally, I prefer the new Gladius. I did not always like the old Gladius. It sounded kind of like an alien starship with the singing engines. I like how they kind of kept that with the old one a little bit, but it has more of this kind of grit to it, and it just feels... It reminds me of like a V12 engine, or like even a Ferrari engine, how they have these really tonal type of engines because of the way they tune their exhausts. And it's not exactly one-to-one, right? It's just something that comes to mind. It reminds me of a combustion engine. It feels grittier. Remember, the Gladius is supposed to be an old workhorse for the UEE. So the fact that it feels kind of grittier, it doesn't feel super sci-fi and high-tech. I prefer that. I highly prefer that kind of design approach. I like that kind of almost... feels like it's grounded in reality in some way. That's why, to me, the first thing that came to my mind is like, this sounds like a V12 engine or something like that. But beyond that, there's some more technical stuff that you may or may not have noticed there. The Gladius, as it accelerates, has like a kind of tonal sound, but it doesn't have a lot of change in pitch and variety to it, if that makes sense. Yes, there's elements that change as you constantly change your direction and whatnot. But when you listen to the one for the Squadron 42, it has way more character as the player is applying throttle or backing off the throttle. You can hear it tonally shifting up and down. The Gladius currently right now kind of does that too a little bit, but it doesn't do it as well as the one in Squadron 42. And I think what they're trying to do is translate the sense of speed into the actual audio work. Because one of the things I'll explain here, Elite Dangerous does this really well. Elite Dangerous does really good translation of your speed just through the sound alone. As you apply throttle, you can kind of hear the engine, and as you pull back, you can hear it kind of dial back. And it feels really connected to the throttle, which Star Citizen doesn't have right now. Now, probably because at some point they were probably thinking, well, we want to kind of distance ourselves. Remember, a lot of in the early days, I don't know personally if still people are working there, but a lot in the early days, a lot of Frontier's sound designers moved over to CIG, so that's why there's some similarity in some aspects. Not really. I don't remember if there's any Frontier developers still there or not. But I do remember that at some point they had Frontier sound designers actually working at CIG at one point. But hey, I mean, don't break what's already pretty good, right? So, I mean, if Elite Dangerous nailed that pretty good and you feel like you need to kind of take that element, why not, right? I think it's a pretty good system that they should apply to it. If you're going to bring that in, cool. I don't think there's any shame in taking ideas from other games that have done it really well and then applying it to your game. I don't really see any approach. So I don't really see anything negative there. I'm glad that they're actually going to, if that is their kind of philosophy, that they're going to go with that. All right, let's go ahead and double back towards the panel and let's talk about the weapon sounds and that new multi-band compressor they're using to kind of improve the overall audio. Now, I don't want to get too technical about what a compressor is, but I do kind of want to explain it on a base level so that way you can kind of understand what they're talking about in here. A compressor, what it does is it takes the loudest parts of your sounds and the quietest parts of your sounds, and it tries to kind of bring the volume levels on them up and down so that way they're closer together at volume levels. So for example, if I have me walking down the street and then a gun goes off in the distance and then I'm continuing to walk down the street, you're going to hear the sounds of my footsteps, the gun goes off, and then me continuing to walk, right? Now, if I applied a compressor to that, the gun sound is not going to be as loud. It'll be a little bit quieter, but also my footsteps are going to be a little bit louder. And our perception of that is that the overall soundscape of everything coming in together is going to sound a little bit louder overall. My footsteps are going to sound a little bit louder, but that gunshot is also going to be decently loud as well. Now, there's going to be some issues that you could have with that with overcompression. You can lose some dynamic range, but now we're talking into the technical stuff of that. We don't really care about that. What I want you guys to do is to turn on your audio engineer / sound designer ears on. I'm going to train you to try to do that. I'm going to show those clips once again, and I want you to really listen and tell me the differences in the characteristics that you're hearing there. There's some that are very obvious, but there may be some that are not as obvious. So let's go ahead and play those clips now. Now, the first most obvious change, of course, with the new sound is the more beefier and meatier and punchier sounds, which I absolutely love. I love having good punchy gun sounds. I always hate how flaccid a lot of the gun sounds sometimes were in Star Citizen, and you can tell that they're improving that. In fact, actually, in the clip I played earlier of me and my Oregon Daymar fighting another fire team up in the hills, I was using the FS9. The FS9 got a rework in its sound. Its original sound was pretty cool. It was really sci-fi LMG sound, but it was really unfortunately, it was a little bit more muddier, a little bit more mushy in its sound, and the new one has much more defined punch to it. So it just has that it feels like every round leaving the barrel is just punching you in the chest. And I love gun audio that sounds like that. I think it sounds really, really good. Games like DICE, and especially games, for the Call of Duty franchise, their audio engineers do stuff like that all the time, and it sounds phenomenal. And I love that CIG is doing that here, but let's talk about stuff that weren't as obvious. So if you were listening to that and you said, the guns sound a little bit more muffled to me, you're not entirely wrong. So what happens is, because they're emphasizing a lot more of those bass and those low mid frequencies, we are losing some of that detail in the high end. Now, that can obviously be rectified. Again, it's a multi-band compressor, so they can tweak things here and there. But one of the cool benefits and knock-on effects, you'll notice when they were firing the P4, you can hear the ricochets in front of you, which is kind of annoying when you're trying to shoot and you really want to enjoy the gun sound at close range, but the ricochets are just as loud as your gun. And with the processed version, the ricochets are a little bit more subdued, which is nice. Now, that's just really a mix issue. They really probably should try to balance that, because you want to try to make it so that way action pieces that are happening nearby you take priority in your mix. And that's the reason why the ricochet was in front of the character and you can hear it was really loud. And then when they had the multi-band compressor, it kind of got a little bit more drawn back into the mix. So it was really, really nice. And I'd like to see more of that. But of course, it's important because in a dynamic set piece like a video game, you need elements like ricochets and explosions to take priority, so that way you are more aware of the danger that's happening around you. If a grenade goes off, but you're shooting your gun and you can clearly hear your gun, but you can't hear the grenade, then you're not hearing the danger that is being posed to you. You can't hear that there's a grenadier with a GL launcher on the top of that staircase shooting down at you, right? So these are things that they can dynamically adjust on the fly, and the multiband compressor there kind of helps with that too in the mix, it seems. So that's really, really nice to see. All right, let's go and move on to the ship weapons, and I want you to, again, turn on those audio engineer ears I'm training you here on, and listen for the changes and see what you notice it's different. Now, obviously, again, the punch in the base has been kicked up a notch, but there's a couple of little things here and there changing. So when you hear the Tarantula ballistic cannons firing, you can hear then in the unprocessed version, you can hear there's like a tail that kind of sounds very sci-fi. It has this wow, wow at the end of the firing. And you'll notice how much more mixed in that is with the more processed version, where it plays much more clearly at the end of the firing sequence rather than in the unprocessed version where it kind of plays throughout the entire firing sequence. It's a little bit more muddied and mixed in there. And then when you hear the repeater, that nose repeater, it sounds incredibly powerful. It sounds way more deadlier with that punch. But again, you'll notice that there's kind of like these weird little like higher frequency elements that are kind of drizzled on top of the sound in the unaffected version. And then the processed version with the multi-band compressor, you'll hear those higher little kind of sweetener tones playing on top of there as well, but you'll hear it more towards the end of the firing sequence rather than interspersed throughout like in the unprocessed version, which can kind of make it a little bit more muddier. So these multi-band compressors are pretty good at also helping keeping that separation of these frequency elements. So that way when you have that bass element kick out, and then once that's completed, you can then have the other higher frequency elements have that space to kind of come in and provide like a really nice tail at the end of it. It's really, really cool. Now, of course, that can be used to kind of like master out the sound, and also those parameters are very dynamic, so they can just dial things in as things are happening within the game. So if things are like, for example, if you start blacking out, maybe they start dialing back on those settings, so that way things start to get a little bit more dull, or maybe you start losing some of that bass, kind of like how it happens right now where the mix kind of has some low pass elements and some stuff gets dialed back as you start to black out and whatnot. And these effects are all completely dynamic, which is really, really nice. And that also feeds into things like the cockpit audio, which they showed next, which I want to talk about. Now, Graham talked about the cockpit audio being really, really nice as it is now, but in my opinion, and maybe it's the same for you, I mean, currently right now, cockpit audio in-game, in my opinion, I would best be described as anemic, especially for combat, because the weapon sounds just feel so weak in comparison to what they can actually do. And I felt like the same thing still was applying here. They showed really, really cool bassy repeater sounds and cannon sounds, but then when they went into the cockpit, it felt like very anemic. That's really the best way to describe it. You can really hear that the weapons lacked a lot of that punch and definition they showed while they were in the exterior view showing that tarantula and that nose repeater. And yeah, I don't know why they just don't translate that in the cockpit, as there is a lot more emphasis on various elements. One of the things though I think they don't always necessarily emphasize enough is the player's weapons. Now, Graham was talking about that the goal is to make the player feel more powerful and impactful with their weapons, but the weapons don't always seem to take center stage in the mix. I don't know why. Now, granted, what they're showing us, of course, is just the earliest iteration of that. Is not, we have entered, or at least according to Chris Roberts, we've entered the polishing stage of Squadron 42, so presumably they're going to be dialing this in more. So maybe we'll see this change as it goes down the line. Hopefully we'll see some ISCs, get some more coverage on this stuff and kind of get some clarification and whatnot. But I also would like to see more emphasis on the ability to customize that mix. Maybe they'll have like a CIG mix, and then you can have like a player mix where you can alter things as you like to see fit. Like I would personally like to emphasize my weapons, maybe make them a little bit punchier and bassier, while everything else kind of gets put to the wayside. Or maybe I'll prioritize impacts on my ship for better readability of the combat, where I'm getting hit from and stuff like that. Maybe that's a thing they're going to do. I think they talked about that at one point, that you will be able to tweak those elements at some point. Don't know when that's going to be in. Don't know if that's going to be in Squadron 42. Don't even know if we'll see that anytime soon. But if that is a thing they are going for, I would be 100% for that. I would love for us to be able to tweak the balance or kind of assign more priority and emphasis to something in combat, because for the most part, like what you hear in that mix there was really a high emphasis on the engines more than you heard an emphasis on just the combat aspects. And if it were me, I would probably dial back the engines and focus more on the combat stuff, simply because I want to hear my guns. I also want to hear where I'm getting shot from. But that's just me personally, and if they give us the option to change that, I would be all for it. In the realistic mode, if you listen carefully, you can actually hear your character moving around, because that's all you're really going to hear is just the air inside the actual cockpit and whatever reverberates through that, including your character, and you can hear the character fully driving some sounds as he's moving the stick around, and presumably, of course, as you click buttons and stuff like that, your character will make sounds as well. But one thing that I think would be a lot better is if they included a lot more dynamic feedback of audio vibrations as you're in the cockpit itself. They already have some of that, and indeed in some parts where they're getting shot, you can hear some vibrations. But what I'm talking about here is when you're engaging the afterburner, or when you're slowing down or pulling rough Gs, you really, really should hear some really gnarly vibrations in the cockpit to really give that emphasis that you're pulling a lot of Gs or that you're pulling a lot of speed. Because one of the complaints I saw a lot of people had for the Squadron 42 was the overemphasis on screen shake as a way of showing G-forces and speed. And I can kind of see the points of that. I don't personally care. I use head tracking anyway, so I'm just going to turn all that off anyway. But one thing that I can see that being an issue for people definitely should probably be looked into, and audio is a good way of getting around that. Now, like I said, the thruster sound they have designed there where it kind of follows the throttle output, that's also a very good change for helping the player understand their speed, but they can do a little bit more there, and I think one thing they can do is emphasize more on the cockpit vibrations as a way of translating sounds. Now, they already have stuff like that in-game now. You even saw some of that in the realism audio demo there where he got hit. You can hear the resonance kind of playing some vibrations, but what I'm talking about is when you're flying, when you're applying more Gs, when you're pulling hard on the stick or just applying thrust. I would love to hear more things jiggling about in the cockpit. And one of the other things I think they could also do as well, they did a demonstration of the flight model changes and whatnot in the later panels, and you saw they flew in atmosphere, and it doesn't really feel that different than what we're used to now. I feel like if you're in atmosphere, you should really start to feel a lot more jiggling or hearing a lot more jiggling and vibrations in the cockpit than you do now, just to give an emphasis on your speed, how fast you're going, and just to make it feel more connected. Let me play a trailer of a new plane coming to DCS. DCS is a flight sim I love playing. They have the new F4 Phantom coming out soon. And in the trailer, one thing that really caught my attention was the attention to detail inside the cockpit. And I'm going to play this little clip here, and then I'll be right back. Now, you'll notice in the actual cockpit itself, things actually jiggle, the wings jiggle, all things jiggle, because in real life, that's actually how a plane works. It does actually jiggle like that. It's not stiff like we're used to with our ships in Star Citizen. Now, of course, we're ships 900 years in the future. We don't need to have things jiggle like that. However, that is an excellent way to sell a sense of speed, is when things around you start to vibrate and create noise. And in the cockpit, that'd be pretty cool. You don't necessarily need to hand animate everything like they've done here, because that would be quite a huge endeavor to do it for every ship. Maybe even do that if you want, like for Drake ships or something like that. But honestly, all you really need is just the sound, and on top of the actual screen shake if they still want to incorporate that. And that is an excellent way of selling speed and power of your ship. That is a really, really good way of giving that tactile feel that you're part of this death machine that you are flying. Now, CIG has already accounted for this. In the background, what you are currently hearing are sounds that are already in the game. If you have Star Citizen installed right now, these sounds are on your computer right now, and they do play in-game, but you mostly hear them when you're flying a big ship and you start to accelerate or decelerate. These are most of the sounds you're eventually going to hear, but when you're in small cockpits, think to yourself, when was the last time you've ever actually heard these sounds ever play in your cockpit? Probably never. Maybe the only time is when you're entering atmosphere, but really no more else than that, right? And that's what I mean by they really could do with adding some real nice new cockpit audio, like vibration sounds, to really sell that sense of speed. And it's an element that I think is just criminally underused in Star Citizen. Let me give you an example. This is my Antares video, the co-pilot no audio sim video. And this section here, I added those same vibrations from the game into the cockpit audio, and just listen to that and compare that to how you're used to flying in Star Citizen. Tell me which one you think would be a better experience for the player.
Primary is Alpha Kilo Hurricane.
Copy, Alpha Kilo.
Roger, Alpha Kilo.
Prepping EMP.
When you're in range.
Firing.
Enemy down.
Good kill, good kill.
Shields damaged.
Bravo Foxtrot.
Copy.
Shields damaged.
Charging up EMP. Pushing closer. Dropping EMP. Now, I'm not using this to crap on CIG's audio or anything like that. Just a reminder, the sounds in that clip I just played are from the game itself. They're just repackaged and repurposed to sell it in a different way that gives a different immersive experience. So CIG has all this stuff at their fingertips already right now. And if they wanted to sell it like that, they totally can. And if they want, again, they could potentially put that in the hands of the player through the sound sim if they allow us to actually modify and change it. But again, this is just to illustrate that the vibrations really make the ship feel alive in certain aspects. Like obviously, I'm just using what Star Citizen has to offer there to kind of sell that in that video. And I'm hoping that you at least understand where I'm coming from, where I say that sound can really make the ship feel alive. It also can give a sense of speed in some cases too when it's done correctly. All right, enough blathering on. Let's talk about the no audio sim part of the demonstration here. Once again, I did feel like the weapons were a little bit anemic. Hopefully that can be dialed in. I've already made my piece on that, so I'm not going to reiterate on that again. However, I will say that it is really, really awesome to finally see them actually start working on this front. I've been doing the no audio sim stuff since, gosh, I think it was what, 3.7, maybe 3.8, maybe 3.9, I don't remember. I had videos going way back since the dawn of Star Citizen's time, essentially, where they had initially mentioned it and I had tried it out for myself. There was an old video of me flying a Saber. It's on my channel. I'll try to put an iCard if I remember to put one here. And if not, I'll try to remember to put it in the description. You can check out the really old first attempt I did of that. And yeah, I mean, I've been wanting them to do this for a long time. Now, I know a lot of people seem to get confused thinking that this was CIG taking inspiration from me. Now, I'm very flattered at the thought that people think that CIG did this because I did this. This is not the case, guys. Remember, CIG have been talking about wanting to do this for a long time now. Very, very long time. I only took the idea and ran with it using my skill set, and my videos are a result of that. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is they've mentioned that they didn't even know whether it was going to be a full realistic sim like they showed here way in the past, or if it was going to be something kind of in between. They didn't know, but it looks like they are going for full realism. And of course, they're also dialing that in for the first-person shooter aspect of it. But make no mistake, guys, this was never something that I pushed them to do. That was not the case. They had already had this planned out. This was something they wanted to do. They just didn't know how they were going to approach it. And now that Squadron 42 is coming towards the tail end, at least for episode 1, it seems like they had the time and resources to now dedicate getting the audio into that state to present that to the player in the single player and of course to us in the PU. So once again, I'm flattered you guys think that CIG were doing this because of me, but in reality, like I said, I was copying CIG, not the other way around. I was simply applying what they said they wanted to do and putting it into the game.
Okay, next question comes from Bear, who asks, we've been told Star Citizen will go for the Hollywood version of space simulation, where sounds travel through the void. Have you considered having a switch in the game options where external sounds can be turned off? Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a few times. It definitely isn't that difficult to sort of have the version when you're outside and the listener and the sound system's outside, you don't really hear any sounds. So that is definitely something we would consider. We have considered it and probably would put it in, but that's sort of a kind of a plus item, let me put it that way. So it's not something that I would hold up other work for, but it would be something that down the road that would be fairly simple to implement and we probably would want to do just to, for the people that want to feel like their sound in space is realistic.
I think we'd rather have something. I mean, what I like about it is that it will be something I hope will be within the control of the player. We'll be able to turn this off, and we'll go for a. I can't commit to this fully, but that's pretty much proviso we say about everything. But
I cannot confirm or deny.
But it will be because I hope eventually it will be harnessed as a gameplay mechanism within its own right. Maybe it can be turned on and off for some sort of tactical or strategic advantage. But we need to present sometimes these kind of elements and tools almost for designers to say, oh, okay, that's something that we could actually use to fold into a mission or scenario or something like that. And I think that would just really open possibilities up in the verse.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool in a situation you're in a big space battle and you get EMP'd or your ship gets disabled and then your sound sim falls away.
Yeah,
and then it's just you stuck with the sound of your immediate surroundings, the ship. You see all the stuff going on and you've lost that sensory input. Yeah. And then you're really in trouble then.
There was a bit we were kind of thinking about making it, maybe it's processed to such a high fidelity by your ship. And so that would give you kind of almost a tactical reason to park up your ship near to certain action and stuff like that. But again, that's something I was still to talk with designers about whether that's something they would actually go for. I mean, maybe that's something that would be painting them too much of a corner. But I like thinking in terms of sound having meaning like that and being able to actually present possible gameplay things to everybody. Really.
And as you can see, CIG have been wanting to do this for a long time, going back as far as Chris when the community asked him about this, all the way up until 2018 when Lee Banyard and Philip Smallwood also discussed it on Star Citizen Live, or Reverse the Verse Live as it was called at the time. And one of the things that really caught my attention back then, and is still catching my attention now, especially with what Graham showed us, is that how gameplay is also going to be a factor alongside audio. Not too many games do this. Not many games use audio as a gameplay mechanic. And Star Citizen is going to stand out from the pack simply because they're going to utilize sound as a gameplay feature. Remember that the sound simulation will potentially have like a component that can be EMP'd or destroyed in the middle of combat, and that can completely change the way you have to interact with the game. And then, of course, you can also tweak that potentially. I mean, they said that that's what they want to do, and that's something that Graham kind of alluded to in his demonstration, is that we will have the ability to also tweak that ourselves so we can kind of tie things the way we want it, but also play into gameplay. You'll notice when they showed the realistic sound sim for the Gladius demo there, the impacts and any types of attacks the enemy was doing to the player were far more pronounced. Even Graham mentioned that the sense of danger is a lot greater when you have the sound sim off because everything is a little bit more heightened rather than having the simulation do it for you. And you definitely can notice that there. If you kind of A and B back and forth between the standard setup and the realistic setup, you can really hear the actual effects on your ship far more pronounced. And that's because the mix is a little bit cleaner, a little bit more open and vast. So it's a lot easier for them to bring those sounds and make them far more part of the attention that is being drawn to the player. In this case, you can hear the sounds bouncing off the hull pretty hard, and it sounds a lot more terrifying. And this goes for the FPS stuff as well, because in FPS, when you take a hit, you can hear your guy actually grunting with pain, and it really feels a lot more grounded. Like you're like, oh, I'm mortal here. I just took a hit. I really should be careful. And it really makes you nervous because also your tactical awareness is so severely reduced in first-person combat when you can't hear anything going on around you. So you could be running around a corner taking shots and not even knowing you're taking shots until you get hit. And it's kind of cool how this is playing into gameplay. Maybe the enemy has EMPs. We do know that CIG is going to be working on new types of grenades at some point. We haven't seen those yet, but one of the things they wanted to do at some point was like an EMP type of grenade that could disrupt your sensor systems. Could you imagine you being in a fight in vacuum and you're hearing all the sounds through your suit, and then you take a grenade that EMPs your suit, and now all of a sudden you can't hear anything. It's just completely dead, but bullets are still flying your way. This is stuff that gets me super, super excited. Cannot wait. Yeah, but overall that caps off the audio panel, the very short panel that we got on the first day. On the second day, we did get a little bit more when they were talking about the first-person combat changes in general from all the devs that are working on that. There were some talk about audio changes to the weapons in Star Citizen, which kind of feeds back into what Graham was talking about in the first day, where he was talking about how there is some improvements to audio through some of the tech that they're bringing in. And why don't we go ahead and just play that really quick, because it's pretty cool. Now, I do apologize, the audio is not the greatest. This is from the Twitch stream, and unfortunately, the production team there was kind of intermixing the crowd as well as the actual video that was shown, so you don't get the full fidelity of the actual sound effects from the guns, but we're still going to show it anyway, so let's go ahead and play that.
And weapons are ultimately as only good as they sound. I'll be quiet for this next bit, but as you know, we've done a lot of work on our audio propagation systems and just in general how guns sound. We've also switched out some noises and made them feel a lot more beefy. Fantastic. I think all of California heard us there.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Can't wait to see more of this stuff come down the pipe. Now, you'll see, he said, I think all of California heard us there, and the reason why is because on the Twitch stream you didn't hear it, but for us there, actually physically there at CitizenCon, we actually had a huge speaker setup, including huge subs, so the sounds were just earth-shattering, and it was awesome. When they did the Maelstrom demonstration and they crashed the Gladius into a building, it might as well have been an earthquake. It was insane. It felt awesome, and it was really cool to see Star Citizen portrayed in such a really, really high-end sound system like that. It was really, really fun to see. But yeah, overall, this panel I think was pretty good. I loved that Graham took some time to show us what they were working on with him and his team, but I really would love to see a lot more than what was shown currently. And listen, Graham, if you want to make it up to me, 2024 is going to be it, right? Because you guys are on polishing stage. Come on. I want to see some more. Oh, let's talk about the Gladius. Let's talk about how you're going to approach doing the Anvil, the Lightning. Let's talk about how you're going to approach with your team doing gold standard audio passes for all the ships currently in game. Let's talk about, hey, any new guns like the new Volt gun they showed? Like, let's talk about some of that. I want to hear more of Star Citizen, and I would love to hear, Graham, you and your team as well, show off what they can do, and 2024 is going to be all for that. I cannot wait to see more of this evolve as we start to slowly march our way towards release of Squadron 42, whenever that will be. Alright folks, that's it for me today. It's about 3:30 in the morning right now, currently while I'm recording my voiceover for all this, so I'm probably going to get some sleep. By the time I wake up, hopefully this video will be uploaded and in your hands. We shall see. But yeah, if you did indeed enjoy my breakdown of the audio panel from CitizenCon, and of course giving my thoughts and commentary on just the general aspects of Star Citizen's audio, please leave a like as it really does help at the channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this and much more down the line, subscribe. Until next time, fly safe, and I'll see you all in the black.